Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. And the topic of this 10-minute moan is looking at some facts that quite a lot of people, if not everybody's missed, about the SNP finances over the last sort of 8 years, which coincides with the £600,000 allegedly missing from their coffers. Now, there's some things that I never knew until I was looking at it this morning about the finances of the SNP, looking at their accounts from 2016 onwards. And it's quite fascinating reading. You maybe figure out why they had so many fundraisers at the time. So just to give you a reminder, the Scottish public voted in the referendum in 2014. They lost that referendum to the Nationalists, and 55% of those who voted to remain in the United Kingdom. Then the following year, in May 2015, there was a kind of impressive, to be honest with you, SNP result at the general election for Westminster, where they won 56 out of the 59 Scottish seats and got about 50% of the vote. But when you look at the numbers, the amount of people that voted for independence and voted for SNP in that election, it kind of ties together that it was more of a protest vote with people who had voted yes in the referendum for an independent Scotland but lost the referendum. So a few months later, it was about 8 months after the referendum, this general election, and they had their best ever result in Westminster, and they never matched it since. So that was the sort of run up to 2016 and where the country was. In 2016, we had the Brexit referendum, where the United Kingdom voted 52 to 38% to leave the EU. But the Nats weren't happy with that because 60% of Scotland wanted to remain in the EU, which is a bit bizarre because in the referendum we had 2 years previous, if that was successful, we would have been out the EU by default. So they started this campaign that, Scotland was dragged out the EU against its consent, but Scotland was never a member of the EU. So I don't know how you could make that one work. But that's certainly where the Nationalists started saying at that point, and I found that most bizarre. So just soon after that, in March 2017, Nicola Sturgeon announced plans for a second referendum, and in the same day, she launched this new fundraiser, which was for, and I quote, funds to campaign in a second referendum. So the promises were made that this money would be ring-fenced, and that's where the problems arose for the SNP, and that's why some people reported it to the police. And some people who are mad independence wishers, like the Wings Over Scotland social media pages, they were starting to ask questions about this and suggesting that people who had made donations to this fund that was meant to be ring-fenced should ask some questions. And the reason was, for a party, a body that had £600,000 by this point of other people's money ring-fenced, their accounts came out in 2017 for the year of 2016, and it showed they only had £96,000 or £97,000 in the bank. So people were thinking, well, where's the ring-fenced money? That's money that you've accepted to use during the campaigning of a future referendum, which obviously we hadn't had at this point. And where's the money? Now, I was asking myself some questions about it, and I wanted to learn more about their finances at the time. So I've been looking online because, like all parties, they need to submit and are made public their accounts for each year. Now, what I looked at first was the accounts from 2017. This was the year that they opened up the fundraiser for this referendum. And there was a couple of weird things. The first weird thing was, now the funds started coming in 2016, so on an account it shows you this year, which is 2017, plus the previous year, 2016. And the first thing I looked at was cash in bank, cash in hand. Now in 2016, the cash in hand was £52,000. And after this year of collecting this money, the cash in hand was £7,900. You thought, well, that's a bit weird. But what I thought was even weirder, when I went up, that was on the balance sheet, when I went up to the actual income and expenditure lines on the accounts, it showed you, sorry, I'm talking nonsense, further down on the balance sheet, it tells you their liabilities. Now, the year before 2016, when that finished, they had loans outstanding of £518,000. By the end of 2017, that had come down to £115,000. So they managed to pay off in this year about 400 grand. And the other thing I thought was a bit weird was the amount they'd spent on campaigning. Because, like I remind you, in 2016, the only campaigning we really had was for Brexit. In 2017, there was a snap election called by Theresa May, and that was in June 2017. So you would imagine 2017, you would have spent more money on campaigning than you did in 2016, because there was no election, there was no general election, there was only Brexit. But it's weird that when you look at the income and expenditure for campaigning costs in the year of the referendum, not an election year, 2.3 million quid. The following year, where you had a general election, it came down to 1.5 million. So oddly enough, they'd spent loads of money in 2016 campaigning when there was no elections other than Brexit. I find that a bit odd. But to be fair, 1.5 million the following year, £800,000 less when you did have an election. It's just a bit potty. But I thought that the big jumping out thing at me was this debt that they owed had come down the year. Bear in mind that they started collecting money from people that they told people they were going to ring fence for a second referendum. But then there was even stranger things. Now, the guy who... So it was later on, because the following year their accounts were this 100 grand, and folk were like, well, where's the dough, right? But what I found peculiar about that time is the then treasurer, who was Colin Beattie, he had a strange timeline with the party, because early on he was the treasurer, okay? But around about October 2020 is when people started asking questions, pro-independence bloggers, as I say, Stuart Campbell, the guy that runs Wings Over Scotland. But in March 2021, 3 SNP officials, Lord Provost Frank Ross, who was Edinburgh Lord Provost at the time, Alison Graham and Cynthia Guthrie, all resigned from the party's Finance and Audit Committee after being denied sight of the accounts. And a statement from them read out that an SNP NEC, that's like their National Executive Committee meeting, the party's ruling body, Miss Guthrie later joins newly launched Alba Party. Then there was a video that emerged in 2023 from that time, which apparently shows Nicola Sturgeon telling NEC members that the party's finances have never been stronger, and warning of the impact of future donations if anyone went public with concerns about finances. And a few days after that, the Police Scotland received its first complaint, wildly, and people think that was from a guy called Sean Clerk, and he's certainly the one that's taking the credit for going to the police. So then what happens in May 2021, so March we've got these 3 officials leave. In 2021, May, Douglas Chapman resigned as a treasurer, saying that he'd not received support of financial information required to carry out his fiduciary duties. And he'd only been in the job since November, so he'd only done the job, 6 months? When he beat Colin Beattie, who was the treasurer at the time, he got papped out. The new guy came in. Now, Colin Beattie has never resigned in his position as treasurer in his life. He's done it twice. So this guy left after 6 months, after defeating Beattie in an election to be the treasurer. The new guy leaves after 6 months, and guess who comes in? Colin Beattie comes back in. So he comes back in sometime mid-2021, and then Joanna Cherry, who's a King's Counsel, she resigned her position, citing over transparency, and then Mr Beattie was reappointed as his party treasurer. So that's a bit weird, right? Now, I put out a tweet just yesterday. I'm just going to pull it up just so I can get the exact details. Now, Colin Beattie said in October 2021, he insisted that there was £593,501 ring-fenced for the referendum appeal fund. That was his words in October 2020, before he got voted out of the party, right? Then, when he was back in the party, the SNP treasurer admitted in June 21 that the party had spent £600,000 of the donations for Scottish Independence Fund and other things. And that's some jump, isn't it, in such a timescale? Now, that again's June 21, you need to remember all this. In June 21, the SNP chief executive at the time, Peter Morrell, husband of Nicola Sturgeon, provided a £107,000 loan to the party to assist cash flow. Put money back in, and that's quite a sum. That's for a guy that probably earned about that in a full year before tax, in his position as the chief executive. I think it was more than that. I think they paid him about £70,000 or £80,000. It does show in the accounts, to be fair. And then in July, police started this branch farm investigation. And I just think this whole thing is pretty damn mental. And when you look at it, I don't know how they didn't, nobody questioned this before. Like, this party who was running at a deficit, I mean, their normal donations, the deficit, by the way, from 2016 was 1.3 million quid. So in the end of that year, they were like, we've lost 1.3 million. We only had in the bank, I think it was that year they had the 7,000 with that balance sheet. Sorry, 52,000. But when you've got £52,000 in the bank and you've just bumped 1.3 million a year before, it's not a great position. So within months of those accounts being finalised, they're out with the begging bowl out. Nicola Sturgeon started this fundraiser. And within the next 12 months, they've managed to bring their debt down by almost £500,000. These things are just nuts. And I don't know why nobody else has looked back at the time of when people have looked at it later on in the story, years later, and they actually did stop the fundraiser at a time, and then they restarted it again, and God knows how much they eventually can't. But the things that was just jumping out at me, particularly for that one set of accounts, was writing off this debt, spending more at Brexit year campaigning than they did in a general election year. But the end of that year where they started the fundraising, the cash in the bank was down to £7,900. And the thing that I don't get out of this is the amount of people. Now, John Swinney has actually come out and said it appears that we could be allegedly victims of embezzlement here. So he was saying all along, oh no, there's no problem, right up to branch farm started, there's nothing to see here, we're all right. He couldn't believe it when the treasurer wrapped it. He was like, don't know why he's left, but crazy that, right? Well, now he's saying that we appear to be the alleged victims of embezzlement. So even the party's admitting now that it looks as if somebody stole some money off us. But the cult and the membership and their supporters are wanting to be in complete denial. And they're saying things like, well, the money was just used for something else, but that's not how it was raised. And people want to just conveniently forget that this money was raised and told by the party it was ring-fenced. There's quotes there from party officials telling you, no, we've ring-fenced just under £600,000 at certain points. And the whole thing stinks for high heaven. People that are supporting of the SNP should be the ones that are up in arms. And they seem to conveniently, they think, oh, there's nothing happened just because St. Nicola, O.J. Sturgeon, is not being investigated anymore, that suddenly nothing happened, forgetting that there was a man in court the same day who faced the charges of embezzlement. Crackers, absolutely crackers. They should be the ones that are up in arms. But who am I? I'll just point out facts as I always do. So if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not already done so, please hit the subscribe and the notification bell. If you want to help the channel, this video, get seen by more people, thumbs up, put some comments in, hit the share button. That always helps, and I appreciate it when people do so. But most importantly of all, unless you're the type of person that one day tells us the money's still there and a few months later tell us it might not be there. These people, these type of people, know you. But everyone else, have a great day. Cheerio, bye now.